Good morning. Oh, that was underwhelming. Good morning. Much better. All right. So over the last few years, how many of you guys are on social media? Anybody? A couple of you. If you're on social media, you may have seen me post this concept here. God is provider, God is sovereign, God is healer. The reason that I post that stuff is that I learned those concepts in a really deep way through something that happened to me, which I'm going to share this morning. And I was able to take these things and not just know them in my brain, but get them into my heart. And that's the story that I want to share with you guys today. We've all got a story. You have a story. So I share mine today just in the hopes that some of this will help you guys as you live out your story. So my story starts here. How many of you guys watch Shark Tank? Anybody? I love Shark Tank. It's a weird show, kind of. There's some weird people. There's some good ideas. There's some funny ideas, bad ideas, dumb ideas. But I think it's entertaining. It's inspiring. As a business leader, I like it. So Troy mentioned some things about me and just some of my background. I've got a few different jobs. I lead worship here at Central, which I've done for about 30 years. Started right up here. But during the week, I own and operate a few different companies here in Fort Wayne. The largest company is CSD, like he mentioned. We've been in business for 30 years also, and work all across the country with churches, and I lead a team of about 60 people. And we've got offices in Indiana, Texas, and Colorado, and we've got employees spread all across the country. So my week, a lot of times, a fair amount of travel. So sometimes my week looks like I lead worship on a Sunday, I get on a plane Monday, and I go somewhere and meet with architects or clients or both and kind of do my thing there and then come back on a Friday or Saturday, lead worship, and repeat. I don't do that always, but there was a season in my life where I did that a lot, so quite a bit of travel. And then for the last 10 years, I've also been working in mergers and acquisitions, so we've acquired several companies, bought and sold companies. So just some of my background. So back to Shark Tank. The reason that I love that is just to see people, kind of pitch. I'm getting messed up here. Seeing people pitch their ideas on Shark Tank. And so with all the stuff that I've seen in business, really been able to see some success in business, which I'm really thankful for. But I also have been poor. Like, I know what it's like to not be able to pay your bills. I know exactly what it's like when you run out of money every week. I know it's exactly what it's like when you look around and say, why does everybody else's car work and mine catches on fire? I know what it's like to sit at the kitchen table with your wife and get the foreclosure notice that you're getting kicked out of your house. I know that, so I've seen those extremes. I've always tried to follow God's plan, God's prompting. I'm a risk taker. So if God asks me to take a risk, I try to say yes to those. I can't say that I always have, but I try to. Try to honor God, try to honor people, and try to give God credit for everything. And one of the things that I really believe, the verse that you've probably heard, James 1:17, that says, every good and perfect gift comes from the Father. I believe that with everything that's in me, so I try to always name, what are the good gifts that God's given to me? What are the perfect gifts that God's given to me? And so as a business leader, that's why this kind of show inspires me. But far more important than inspiration from Shark Tank, I wanted to share a prayer with you that I have prayed probably for more than 25 years now, which is this, prayer Jabez, which you've probably heard of, and I'll read that to you. Oh, that you would bless me indeed and enlarge my territory, that your hand would be with me, that you would keep me from evil, so that I don't cause pain. And then it said God granted him what he requested. So if we pick that apart, and man, you could spend an hour on this. This is one of the coolest things in the Bible, I think. But just quickly, I remember when I found this thing, I found it years and years ago when there was a point where there was a little book, and this was the cool thing. Like, this was the cool thing in Christianity, was the prayer Jabez. So I found it, liked it, started praying it. And I remember that first little chunk, God, oh God, that you would bless me indeed. And man, I wasn't comfortable with that. It just felt like I was just wanting to get stuff and wanting to be blessed. And I just wasn't comfortable with that. But I also knew that, as a father, just like us fathers, we love to give good gifts to our kids. And that made sense to me. And I'm like, well, hey, God wants to give good things to me. And so I would say, hey, whatever you've got for me, let's do it. I want that. Bless me. And then I love that word, indeed. Like, bless me, indeed. And then enlarge my territory. So, make my network bigger. Make the people that I'm able to influence, make that bigger, increase that. And I would pray that. And as our company grew, there were sometimes I would laugh when I prayed that, because I'm like, it's big enough. I don't want more. I don't want to travel more. I don't want my network bigger. I think my territory is big enough. But I would keep praying that, keep praying, God, enlarge my territory. And then keep me from doing wrong, keep me from evil, so that I don't cause pain. We don't like that part. If we make good decisions, there are consequences. If we make bad decisions, there are consequences. We don't like that part. Not every time that bad things happen to us are we being attacked. Sometimes we make bad decisions, and there are consequences for that. And so I want to give you a really loose translation of that last part. And I don't know, Troy, can I share non-Bible verse things here? Is that permitted? Okay. So I'm going to share, this is a very loose translation of the last part of that prayer of Jabez from our friend John Wayne. Life is hard. It's harder if you're stupid. Very true. That is very true. So I like that little words from John Wayne there. So back to Shark Tank. So since I follow that, I get all their stuff. They email me stuff. And one of the things that I got was this thing called How to Set Goals Like a Shark. And I thought that sounded kind of cool. I'd never done that. And it was a downloadable sheet that just had, you would write down your goals for like 1 year, 5 year, 10-year goals. And so we did that. I did that, gave it to my wife. She filled it out. That was an interesting exercise. If you write down your goals, have your wife do it separately, compare those. That's a different talk. So we wrote that down. We wrote down our goals. And one of the goals that we had was a house at the beach. And we set our sights on Gulf Shores, Alabama. We'd been going there for about 15 years. We loved it there. Just a great smaller town than some of the other places that we'd been to. We could drive there pretty easily from Fort Wayne. So we liked it, and we'd kind of set our sights on Gulf Shores. So this whole time that I've been in business, worked really hard, tried to be financially conservative. We were debt-free. God had blessed us tremendously, and so we were able to do this thing. And so we said, hey, let's do it. Let's do this thing. Let's get a house at the beach. And so we start the search. And if I'm in a project, I become like obsessed with research, so I spend like way too much time on this thing, and I look at tons and tons of houses. And we finally found the house that we like, and we're ready to make an offer, and the house goes off the market the day we're going to buy that house. Didn't get sold, it just like vanished, it just went off the market. And so we were bummed about that, but there's nothing we could do, so we go on with our life. And about 9 months later, one day I get an alert on my computer from Zillow, and it says, this house is back on the market. And it was back on, and it was at the exact price that we thought it was worth about a year before. So I call my wife. I say, hey, you want to make a trip to Alabama? And she said yes, and we flew down to Alabama. This was June 2020. Does anyone remember 2020? Kind of a weird time. So June 2020, we fly to Gulf Shores, Alabama. We look at this house, we like it. Now, is June 2020, spring of 2020, is that a good time to buy a house? Was there ever a time in our world that collectively the world has lost its mind and we don't know anything, right? We just don't know how to go forward in anything. But that's where we were, and we thought, we don't know if this is a good time to buy a house, but we felt like we were led to do that. And so in June 2020, we bought our dream house at the beach. And that's us standing in front of the development there. So we did that. Big step. If you walk out the front doors of our house and you take a few steps, you're at the Gulf of Mexico. If you walk out the back door and you take a few steps, you're in Little Lagoon, which is a protected private land, so nobody can build on it. There'll never be any houses back there. It's just gorgeous. I love it. And we couldn't wait to share this with our family. And so in September, we schedule a family vacation. Now, my family, we've been married 32 years. We have 5 kids, 4 of those are married, have 7 grandkids. 2 more grandkids are currently baking in the oven right now. They will pop out in September. So we'll have 9 grandkids. So we got a full house, lots of people. So we take this whole crew, we go down to Alabama, have a great vacation. This is in September. Everybody loves it. We make good memories. We get sunburned, all the stuff that you do at the beach. And we come back to Indiana September 11th, 2020. 5 days later. So we come back September 11th. 5 days later, September 16th, 2020, which is a date that means nothing to anybody in this room, I'm sure. But here's what happened September 16th, 2020. Hurricane Sally. 125 mile an hour winds, and unlike the storm that came through last night that was moving fast, this hurricane is moving at less than 5 miles an hour. So coupled with a hurricane is never good, this one is moving at less than 5 miles an hour. So it's different than a tornado that comes in and just blows things away and keeps moving. This thing stays there, like it stays there for over a day. So for over 24 hours, it's just pounding Gulf Shores, 125 mile an hour winds, 30 inches of rain, which creates a 6-foot storm surge. And it's like this thing has a bullseye on Gulf Shores, it has a bullseye on my house. It peeled the roof off. So right above our master bedroom, takes about a 12-foot chunk of the roof, gone, 30 inches of rain inside the house, which is not good for a house. So Hurricane Sally destroyed our dream house. And so in this season of life, in that season of life, that's where I learned those 3 things about God that I'm going to share today. So I saw these 3 phrases. It was like crystal clear. It was like you took those things and you just like painted them inside of my brain, or it was like I saw a postcard, and I swear it was just like the postcard was inside my eyelids. Like I would close my eyes and I would just see that. God is provider, God is sovereign, God is healer. And so I learned what these 3 phrases would mean. And guys, when life is good, these things are true. And when life is bad, these things are true. And it's important that we learn to speak truth, because truth is deeper than our emotions. Our emotions change every day, right? How many times a day do our emotions change? Truth never changes. And so I want to dig into these 3 things today. So the day after the hurricane, September 17th, my phone is ringing, as you can imagine. I'm getting calls from my property manager and my neighbor. And we obviously knew the hurricane had hit. We knew it was going to happen. And actually, it wasn't supposed to hit Gulf Shores. It was tracking a different direction. And at the last minute, it kind of took a turn, and we got the brunt of it. But so I know bad stuff has happened. I get the reports from my neighbors. And I just know, hey, I got to get there. I got to go to Alabama. So I get in my truck and I start to drive, and I am totally unprepared. You guys that know me know my mechanical skills are like nothing, but I know I need to get there. I got to get to my house. So I've got a case of water. I've got my iPhone. I've got like an extra shirt, and I've got a Leatherman. So I've got like a pocket knife and a pair of pliers. And here I go into the destruction of the hurricane. So I have no idea what I'm doing. I just know I need to get there. So I drive 900 miles, not prepared. I arrive in town. As you can imagine, most everything is closed. The Target was open. So for you men that have wife and daughters like me, you know that that's the only store that you need is Target. My daughters and my granddaughters can literally go there every day for like 2 hours and just live there. It's like Disney World. I don't understand what's in there. But anyway, so Target is open. I stop into Target. As you can imagine, the shelves are pretty sparse because it had already been picked through. By the time I get there, I was able to pick up some essentials. So I got Little Debbie's, Pop-Tarts, and I'm on my way to the house. So I go down the road to my house, and there's flooding everywhere. There's destruction everywhere. The road that I live on, it's just perfectly straight, just parallel with the ocean. Every telephone pole is snapped perfectly, 45-degree angle, and it's just like you tried to do it. It's just like you went over and broke it and laid them all down perfect in 45-degree angles. And so I arrive at the house. It's dark. It took me way longer than it normally does to get there. By the time I get there, it's dark. There's no power. I pull into the driveway. The driveway is full of pine straw, which is basically just like hay. And I've got flip-flops, shorts. The hay is about 3 to 4 feet tall from everything that had come in from the lagoon. And I'm walking through this. So I'm knee deep in hay, pine straw. I've got flip-flops, shorts. I later found out all that is full of snakes and water moccasins. So that was fun. I didn't see one, but apparently they were all over that place. So I walk into the house, I kind of check things out, got my iPhone. I start to walk down the stairs. The stairs are wood. Everything is soaking wet. I'm wet. I got flip-flops that are wet. You can imagine what might happen next. I fall down the stairs. So I fall down the bottom of the stairs in the dark. I'm laying there in the dark, wet, with my iPhone, in the fetal position, wanting to cry, and thinking, I might not have thought this through all the way. And there I am. I'm at the bottom of my stairs, and I thought, here's my new reality. My dream house is destroyed. Here I am. It's destroyed. Now, I didn't want this. I wouldn't choose this. I don't like this. But I also remember at that moment, I wondered, how can I use this for God's glory? What can I do? And I think that's a good question for us to ask. And it's a good question to ask often. What will our attitude be? How do we move forward, when bad stuff happens? And I wonder, do you have anything in your life right now that you don't like? But you could ask that question. How could this be used for God's glory? And I would be tested on this over and over and over, and I'm going to share some of those today. Here's the first example. I'll call this, let's call this words you don't want to hear, okay? So here's the first words you don't want to hear, that when my neighbor called me, she said this: your boat is gone. And I'm like, what do you mean my boat is gone? I just saw it a few days ago. She said, yeah, your boat is gone. So the last time I saw the boat, we have a boathouse, and there's like a sling. The boat goes into the sling. You raise it up 4 feet over the water, and there it stays, until you come back to the house. And so it was 4 feet above the water. And if you remember, how high was the storm surge? 6 feet. So let's do some simple math. Boat's at 4 feet. Storm surge at 6 feet. So guess what happens to the boat? The boat went for a little ride. And so the next time I saw my boat, it was sitting down the street in my neighbor's driveway, and it was on top of somebody's former pier that's sitting there. And so again, what will my attitude be? What will my testimony be? Will I be a martyr? I'm pretty good at being a martyr. Most of us are. I can try to get people to feel sorry for me. I can be positive. I can try to have fun with this. What will my attitude be? And I thought, I'm going to try to have some fun with this. And so I posted this on social media, and I put this caption on it: Hurricane Sally offers free boat delivery. And I thought it was funny, and some people thought it was funny too. And my neighbor saw this, and my neighbor's talking to me through all this. And the neighbor said, you seem to have a really good attitude about all this, which is really interesting, because in those moments, that's where your testimony starts. Little things like that. Because he was watching me. He was watching me through all this junk that we're having to deal with. And that opens a door to a deeper conversation, because people are always watching us. Everybody's watching us. And especially if we are a Christian, everybody's watching. Everybody's watching. How do you react? How do you respond? Are you going to freak out? Are you angry? Do you curse? Are you hopeless? Do you cope with some kind of substance? Or are you at peace? Everybody's watching. Everybody's watching us. And so even from that picture, I saw God start to provide. And I started to learn what that first phrase means on a deeper level. Again, that first phrase, God is provider. So God is this, the Lord who provides. One of his names is that, Jehovah Jireh. Say that with me, Jehovah Jireh. He is that. He is provider. He is Jehovah Jireh. So if he doesn't do it my way, it doesn't mean he's not provider. And so I would pray with that mindset. I wasn't wishing. A lot of people wish. I wasn't hoping. I was declaring. I was proclaiming, God, you are this. You are provider. You are Jehovah Jireh. And so if I get my way, he is that. If I don't get my way, he is that. He is provider. And so through something as weird and silly as that little picture there, I started to see God provide for me. And through that picture, somebody I hadn't talked to in 35 years saw that Facebook post, and they contacted me, and they were actually a youth group leader from back a million years ago when I was in youth group. And so they called me, and they said, hey, we have something in common. They said, we have a condo in Gulf Shores. I said, oh, that's cool. So we talked about Gulf Shores a little bit. And I said, where is it? And they told me the street. It's on the same street as my house, like a mile down the road. What a coincidence, right? And I talked about, what the next year was going to look like. I said, hey, we're going to have trips to the house and renovation and contractors and all this kind of stuff. And watch God provide here. Here's what they said to me as we talked about that. Here's what they said. You can use our place for free. Pretty cool. Blew me away. They said, well, hey, you're going to need a base camp. You're going to need a place to have meetings over the next year. And they said, hey, use our place for free as much as you need. What a crazy, generous gift that we would use over the next more than a year, probably like 14 months we used that place. And so again, I saw that concept, God as provider, live out like right in front of my face. And I held on to that truth. Again, God is provider. He is that. So what happens next? We've got this house that's been destroyed. So what comes next? Insurance, right? You got to talk to the insurance guy. So insurance inspector comes. It took a few weeks for us to get together with them. And meanwhile, again, if you think of what the conditions are like in the summer in the South, it's 100 degrees. The house has been rained on with 30 inches of rain. It's dark at night. What happens when things are hot and wet and dark? Mold, right? So not good for carpet, drywall, furniture. So it's everywhere. There's tile. It's coming up in between the tile. It's everywhere. And we knew that was going to happen. There's nothing we could do. So the insurance guy comes in there and he gives us the approval to demo, to start demo. He said, hey, you got to take this place down to studs and rebuild. So drywall, floors, the outside of the house was stucco. We had to peel all that off. Doors, windows, electrical, plumbing, like literally everything. Everything's gone. Take it down to studs and start over. And so we started that process. And I can tell you it's weird when you look outside and you see everything that you own laying in the street. So furniture, beds, decorations, drywall, just everything. It's just out. It's out in the street. And the only things that we were able to keep was a refrigerator, one table, and an ice maker. And as Andy knows, we have really good ice. It's just this weird ice maker that's really amazing. So the whole house was gutted, like pretty quickly. We gutted the whole thing. It's a mess. It's taken down to studs. And at that point, I hear more words that you don't want to hear that said, missed one. Well, I guess we don't have that one. We had termites. So I get the call, you have termites. So I didn't want that news, but if we hadn't torn it down to studs, we would never have known that. And we would have had, another surprise waiting for us at some point, which would have been worse. So I kept on speaking that truth. I kept on praying, that God is provider. I kept holding on to that God would provide for us. We keep moving forward. We then get into the fun conversation with insurance companies about money. And you guys probably know how insurance works, so I'm a pretty simple guy. I think if you have a house, let's say your house is worth $100,000, and if your house is lost, and if you've paid your premium, you would expect to get how much for your house? $100,000, that's right. That's what I thought. It seems pretty simple. So we start the demo, everything is demolished, the house is totally torn apart, and we hear from the insurance company a few months later, and they said, hey, we've got your remaining payment for you. I said, that's great. And the remaining payment was 50% of the value of the house. 50%, so half. And so there's a massive amount of money missing. And again, the house is totally destroyed. It's totally deconstructed. It's down to studs. There's no rewind button. There's no undo. We're committed. We got to rebuild this thing. And so I kept praying, God's provider. We got 3 different inspectors who had 3 different opinions. We had attorneys involved, which I was told would probably be needed because somebody told me that this might happen where they would offer you less. So we were ready to fight that. We fought it for 3 months. The whole time I'm praying, God, you are Jehovah Jireh. You are provider. I trust you. We had attorneys ready to go. We had a lawsuit ready to go. There's 200,000 people that filed claims during this time. The whole region, 200,000 claims. So somewhere in that line, I'm a little guy over here trying to make some noise and say, hey, I'd like my claim. So I'm just one claim, us versus the biggest insurance company in the world. Kept praying, kept trusting, kept saying, God, you are provider. And the day we were going to file the lawsuit, that day, we got a message from the insurance company. And they said, we'll pay 100%. They paid for everything. And I say again, God is provider. So he provided the money. We were able to finish the construction. And that was a huge relief, So that part's over. We're all happy. It's like a year at this point. So it was like 13 months. So all that's over. Construction is over. The house was done. It's beautiful. It's perfect. We're ready to move in. We're ready for inspection. The stress is gone. The mess is gone. And I heard more words that you don't want to hear at that point that said this: your house is too short. This might be my favorite one. So I'm like, my house is too short. What on earth could that possibly mean? So if you have a house by the water, they're built on stilts, right? They're built on stilts so the water can pass underneath. So our house is about 16 feet high, built in 2006. So again, in my simple mind, I'm like, well, it was 2021 at that point. I'm like, whatever height this house is now, it was this house in 2000, or this high in 2006, right? Nothing has moved, nothing has changed. And I said, it passed in 2006. And they said, oh, that must have been a mistake. The codes are different now. And my head just wants to explode. And it's 2 inches too low, 2 inches. And I said, okay, what are our options? And so they said the number one was a variance. And my builder told me, he said, hey, don't worry about this. It's no problem. We do this all the time. We're going to file some paperwork. You'll get a variance. You'll pass the inspection. No big deal. In reality, I found out we had to wait 3 months just to go before a committee, just to talk to somebody, just to try to make the case of asking for the variance. Number 2 option was, well, the most humorous, was to carve out a notch in the beams so that when they took the height measurement, it would be 2 inches higher, which didn't seem like a good idea to me, but it was like that was a valid option we were given. And number 3 was the one that they said was probably the most realistic, was they said you have to move the house. And I'm like, what do you mean move the house? Like, you don't just move houses. And they're like, yeah, you'll have to raise the house. You have to raise it so it's 2 inches taller. And I said, well, that doesn't sound like a afternoon project. And so that was the longest lead time of anything, and it was a huge, hundreds of thousands of dollars kind of cost to move that house 2 inches tall. So during this time, I learned the meaning of that second phrase. You guys remember the second phrase is, God is sovereign. What does that mean? It means he's in control. He has a plan. He knows what's going on. Jeremiah 32. O sovereign Lord, you made the heavens and the earth by your strong hand and powerful arm. Nothing is too hard for you. Nothing is too hard for you. And man, that can be super hard to believe sometimes. Can we trust that? Can we trust that really nothing is too hard for God? And especially us guys, men, we want to fix everything ourselves. Not all of us, but probably most of us are fixers. I'm a fixer. Some of us love to fight. Some of us thrive on that. Some of us, that's our identity. And trusting is the opposite of that. Trusting is the opposite of fighting. And so during this time, and I would pray over and over and over again back to that second thing, God is sovereign. And I learned a new name for God, which you can see down there, Jehovah Nissi. Say that, Jehovah Nissi. And that means the Lord our banner. And I had seen that word before, but I didn't really know what it meant all the way. I didn't really know it in a personal way. But I would learn to pray to Jehovah Nissi, and I would pray out loud. I would say, God, you are sovereign. You are a banner over me. What does a banner mean? Here's an example. If you are a Cubs fan, and you've got a Cubs banner, that shows your identity, right? You say, hey, I like the Cubs. That's where my allegiance is. And so if you say God is your banner, Jehovah Nissi, the Lord is your banner. God is your identity. God is your allegiance. And so I would picture that banner. I would picture God protecting me and covering me like an umbrella. And I learned to pray stuff like this. Lord, in the midst of the battles I'm facing, I lift my hands to you. I believe that you are Jehovah Nissi, my banner of victory on life's battlefields. I surrender to you any desire to manipulate or control my battle. I hand over to you my unbelief and fear, my war against temptation and impulse to give in. I don't even remember where I found this prayer, but pretty cool prayer and a good thing to pray. And so I would pray like that, just praying that God would protect me, that he would be my banner. And I can tell you during this phase, during the whole your house is too short phase, I prayed harder than ever before in my life, far more than ever before in my life. And I think when we reach a point of desperation, that's good. Like, we wouldn't choose that, but that's a good place for us to be. Desperation is good. And so I kept praying this thing, God is sovereign. I'd say, you are sovereign. You are Jehovah Nissi. You are my banner. And I kept proclaiming that, and I didn't see it. I didn't see a way out. I didn't see God working. But guys, that is faith. That is the very definition of faith, is when we are sure of something we don't see. That is faith. And so I think it's good for us to face mountains. I think it's good for us to wake up and our face is just smashed up against the mountain and we have no idea what to do. I think that's a good place. It's a good place for us to be, because we get stronger and we get, our perseverance grows, our faith grows, and we pray harder and we pray deeper and we get closer to God. And I know for me, that's when I got closer to God than ever before. I got my faith grew deeper than ever before. And the other thing that I would do a lot is I would pray out loud. And you guys pray out loud? Praying out loud is a good thing. I remember the first time in college, some guy talked to me about that, and I thought he was the weirdest guy ever. I'm like, pray out loud? That's no way. But I've learned that praying out loud is good. And for me, I think my ears need to hear my mouth pray. And my soul needs to hear my mouth pray. Just something, I think it just enhances it when it's out loud. And so I would do that out loud. Again, God, you are sovereign. I would say, hey, I don't see a way out, but you are sovereign. And again, this is faith. This is where we grow strong. And I would say, hey, if I get my way, God, you are sovereign. If I don't get my way, God, you are sovereign. And so for months, I prayed that second phrase, and asked God for grant us favor. And the worst part of this, the part that was just maddening and made me want to just, I don't even know what the emotions are, pull my hair out or scream or kill somebody or all of that. The worst part of this, the house is done. It's sitting there. It's perfect. It's gorgeous. It's done. It's ready to move in. We had crossed the finish line. It's ready to go. We can't sleep there. We can't even spend the night there. We had renters lined up for vacations, had to give all that money back. Super frustrating. And so one Sunday at lunch, we're sitting at home with all the kids, we're having lunch, my phone rings, and it's our builder. And this guy never calls me on Sunday. And so I'm kind of terrified of what's coming next, you know. And so his name was John. I pick up the phone, I say, hey, John, how's it going? And he said, hey, I was at a party last night with the inspector. And I'm like, okay, that's nice. Why are you telling me that? And then he said, I think this might go away. And I'm like, go away? What does that mean? Like, we've been fighting hardcore for like 3 months every day. Go away, what does that mean? I'm like, what happened? And watch this. This is what the builder said. He said, yeah, I talked to the inspector, and he had a change of heart. So the inspector didn't know why his heart changed. I knew exactly why. Sovereign God was working on his heart. I didn't know that. I didn't see that. I had no clue that was going on. But God knew. God was sovereign. God is sovereign. And so the whole time I'm trying to fight that. I'm trying to fight that whole battle. God was fighting for me. Jehovah Nissi was fighting my battle. And with one phone call, all of that was resolved. And so I say again, God is sovereign. And so we wrote this on the bedroom floor in our house. Soli Deo Gloria, that's the name of the house, and it means for God's glory alone. And so after all that, I don't even know, I think it was 13 months, we passed the inspection, we move forward, everything is done. And we open the house, renters come in, we've got 5-star reviews, we go have vacations, life is good, vacations are good, hurricane's over, all the mess is over, all the stress is over, and the story was over. It was over at that point, and we're just like, man, I'm so glad all that's over. Because, man, that was a long haul, super stressful.
And then a weird thing happened one night. I pray a lot at night. And one night I was praying in bed, and I just felt like something was missing. And I noticed, and I'm like, what's missing? Again, by this point, all the hard stuff is over. All the stress is over. And I'm like, just feels like something's missing in my life. And I noticed that I wasn't praying as much as I had been. I wasn't praying as hard as I had been. And I remember saying, man, I miss that desperation. I miss that sense of, my face smashed up against that mountain. Like I missed that feeling. And I remember praying something really dangerous that night. And I said this to God. I said, take me back. Take me back to that place of dependence and draw me close to you. And I want that closeness again. And at the same time, I thought back to remember that postcard that's burned into my eyelids? I thought back to that postcard. And I remembered that third phrase, God is healer. And I forgot about that. I'm like, well, what did that thing mean? I had the first two lines were so clear. I knew Jehovah Jireh, provider. I had learned Jehovah Nissi, sovereign. And I'm like, well, what was that thing about? What was healer all about? And again, we'd already passed the inspection. We went down on vacation. We were at the house. And one day I started to have pain in my left knee. And I'm like, it's no big deal. I'm in my advanced age. Those things happen. And so I've got a pain in my knee, no big deal. But it got worse. It got worse really quickly. And then my right knee had the same thing. And so within a week, I'm hobbling around like I can barely walk. And so reluctantly, I think this is true for most of us guys, only when we're on the verge of death do we go to a doctor, right? And so I went to a chiropractor, got some x-rays, got MRIs, and I got the MRI results, and the results were both of my knees, I had 2 torn meniscus, both my knees torn. Didn't do anything. I don't have any impressive story to tell you of how I tore those, but both of those torn. And so I had a meeting with the doctor. Doctor said this, hey, you need surgery, and you probably got knee replacement in your future. I'm like, oh, that's just great. And so, but doctor tells me that, so what do you do? So we scheduled surgery. And this was in the fall of 21, I believe. So we scheduled surgery. I come back from vacation, and during this time at church, a lot of people don't know this, but there was a period where I would come out and make music, and then I would just kind of hide off stage, because legitimately I could barely move. I was in some serious pain. So I would come out, play some songs, smile at Jeremy, go off to the stage, and just kind of sit there and then come back on. And so we scheduled surgery, and then one night, again, I'm laying in bed, I'm praying, and I thought of that third phrase, again, back to that third phrase, God is healer. And that word, Jehovah Rapha, everybody say Jehovah Rapha. That means the Lord who heals. Again, God is that. He is healer. And I thought, here's this phrase, the third phrase of those 3 things. And I thought, I never even asked God to heal me. Never even asked. I had this pain. I go to the doctor, said, you got torn meniscus, you need surgery, blah, blah, blah. And I say, okay, let's do it. And I never even asked God to heal me. I believe that he could. I believe he's able to do anything he wants to. He can heal anybody, anywhere, anytime. So I absolutely believe he is able. And I thought, well, why wouldn't I ask? Why wouldn't I at least ask God to heal me? And so I did. I just started to pray, God, would you heal me? Now, the important thing here is just like the other 2 phrases, the first 2 phrases, God is healer, whether he heals my knees or not. He is that. And we have to hold on to who God is more than what God does, which I think really screws us up sometimes. He is healer. And so again, I would pray that he is that. I don't have to ask him to be healer. He is healer. And he might heal me physically. He might not. But he is healer. And so we thought of a new plan. We knew, hey, probably have to have surgery. This was in October, and I said, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we put off surgery till January? And I'll just pray the rest of the year, and then if something happens, great, and if not, we'll have surgery in January. And one of the things that I love to do is ride bikes. So I've got an electric bike, got a Harley, love to ride both of those things. Both of those things, I always wear a helmet. There's a little public service announcement to all you guys who ride. Always wear a helmet. But when I wear a helmet, the cool thing is you pray out loud, at least in my helmet, it kind of rolls around in there, and it sounds even cooler than when you just pray out loud regularly. So that became one of my favorite things to do, is pray out loud with my helmet on. And again, I would remember, I'd say, God, you are a provider. You brought me through all that stuff. You are sovereign. You brought me through all that stuff. And I would just go deep. I would just pray harder and pray deeper. And I would pray hard that, God, you are healer. And if you fix my knees, I worship you. And if you don't fix my knees, I worship you. And guess what? One day I realized I had no pain in my knees. And God healed both of my knees. No surgery, no more visits to the doctor. And so again, I say, God is healer. Now again, context for all this stuff. A really important thing for me in all this is for me to focus on who God is versus more than what God does. We've got to focus on who he is more than what he does. And I challenge you to keep that truth in front of you. I challenge you to speak truth to yourself, to speak it to others. Some people will say, follow your heart, which is absolutely terrible advice. Your heart will make you happy. Your heart will make you sad. Your heart will make you positive. Your heart will make you depressed. It's terrible advice to follow your heart. Follow truth. And so for me, my ears needed to hear my mouth speak truth out loud. And so I would say things like, God, you're faithful, you're generous, you're loving, you're holy, you're wise, you chart my path, you go before me, you come behind, you precede me, you follow me, you're my shelter, you're my hope, all those things that we know. But again, I would speak it out loud because things don't always work out the way that we want. And we don't always see God working. It just doesn't work that way. But it doesn't change the essence of who God is. God is sovereign. And one more example of the sovereign thing. We bought our house from some people that we didn't know. We later met them. They had scripture posted all over the house. And they told us that they had marriage retreats at the house. They had ministry events at the house. And they had hoped that would continue. They didn't know us. We didn't know them. And we've seen at our house, we've seen youth groups. We've seen pastors. We've seen Bible studies. We saw some of our best friends get married on that boat dock. And God continues to be honored at that house. And so even though we didn't know it, 2020 was a fantastic time to buy a house. We know that now, right? You know that in 2023. We didn't know. We felt like God was leading us to it. It turned out it was a great investment. But again, we didn't know. Didn't know at the time. Couldn't see it. So what's going on in your life? What's your story? Can you ask that question? How can I use whatever this junk that you've got going on? Can you ask that question? How can I use this for God's glory? How can you talk about it? And what can your attitude be? And how can you pray through all that stuff? Because it's okay for us to not understand why. Our emotions change. God doesn't. Our circumstances change. God doesn't. Our feelings change. God doesn't. And when we don't see how God's going to provide, we still proclaim he is provider. And when we don't see how God will work things out, we still proclaim that God is sovereign. And if we don't know if God will heal us, we still proclaim God is healer. I wasn't going to cry. But we got to focus on who God is more than what he does. And I'll wrap up here. I remember a coworker many years ago, a guy I was trying to mentor and witness to. And I can still remember praying with this guy. And he said, he was going through some stuff in his life. And he said, I tried God. I tried God once. It didn't work. I tried praying. It didn't work. And the translation of that, what that means is God didn't answer the way that he wanted to. And so he gave up. And sometimes we get our way, and sometimes we don't. And sometimes there's a happy ending, and sometimes there isn't. But through this year, through all this, or this year, 2023, just within the last few months, in the span of a 30-day window, 30 days, such a short period of time, in 30 days, I saw friend number 1 get diagnosed with cancer. Friend number 2 healed from cancer. Friend number 3 died from cancer. I don't know why. Don't know why. But I trust and I hold on. And so I'd ask you guys today, what's your story? What do you need to trust God with? Where do you need God to provide? Because you can pray to Jehovah Jireh. You can pray to Jehovah Nisi. And you can pray to Jehovah Rapha. And you can proclaim who God is deeper than what he does. And you can hold on to what is true. And the only thing that's true is Scripture. And we've got to know that. We've got to know that. So, I just challenge you to surround yourself with truth. Speak truth to yourself. Speak it to others. Let others speak it to you. And I'll close with this. Maybe we can say these things out loud. These are 3 true things about God. Let's say it together. God is provider. God is sovereign. God is healer. Thank you.